Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Rogue Wave and I'm going to be sipping on some wild berry tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly search up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, burnt umber, which I call brown, deep yellow, phthalo green, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, which I like to call rust, and Mars black. Of course, you can switch those up if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that I'll be using for some drawing, and then I have 3 brushes. Get them in order here. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 12 round synthetic brush, and I have a number 1 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. Of course, you can switch those up as well. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same type of paint and brushes and all the good stuff in between. So that's there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to paint our background. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm going to use are white and brown. What I'm really just going for is a tan color that will represent the color of the wall, and it will also be a great base for our focal point in the middle, the painting of sorts that we're doing, the picture in the middle that we're doing. So I'm going to use my large brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix myself a tan color, which I've magically done off camera so you can see where I'm headed. How I got to that was I just used white and brown. I do need some of my brown for later in the dark form, so I'm going to just separate a little bit of that out so I have it for later. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of white paint into my brown. I like to add the white paint just a little bit at a time because I know it can really easily go too light on me and then I won't be able to reverse it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white at a time. I'm going for just a medium tan type of color, and that's looking good to me. Once I've achieved what I would like in the shade, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe my brush off on the side of my palette, and I'm going to pick up a big scoop of white paint. I'm going to start at the top of my canvas with this white plus that tan on my brush. So this way what'll happen is I'm creating a gradient of sorts on this wall. So the wall is going to look like it is lighter at the top and it's going to fade down to a darker version down at the bottom. Once I've got that on there, I'm going to pick up white plus that tan again. I have both those colors on my brush, and then after this I'm going to start not picking up any more white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually get it darker and darker as it goes down that canvas. And you can see I just am going back and forth, left to right. I will go back up into the previous section just to make sure that I have those colors well blended. I like to use these long brush strokes to get a nice consistency. I just picked up just the tan color now without washing my brush. And this way I will get it to blend in with the section that I just did up above. And that way that's going to help make it look like there's actually a light source of sorts within this room that we're painting. So it'll make it look like there is some sort of light from above and that it's providing a natural type of gradient to the wall that'll insinuate that the light is coming from above. So when we go to add all of our highlights and our shadows onto our objects that we're putting in this composition, we'll have the implied light source from the top of the canvas. And then I'm just going all the way down to the bottom of my canvas with this color. You might find once you're done, I recommend that you let it dry for a minute, and then if you feel like you want to put a second coat on it just so you can have a nice smooth gradient, you can certainly go ahead and do that. But once you've got it all done, we are going to be using our piece of chalk for the next step. So you can put this large brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be drawing an outline for the picture frame and the wave that's going to be within the picture frame. I do want to forewarn you that before we start the step that you want to make sure that your canvas is dry. So this is that time where you get to take that extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry, or you can do as I did and just whip out a blow dryer and get it dry that way. So I'm going to be using my chalk to do an outline. I'm going to be giving you some points of reference to make some dots. We're going to connect those dots, and by the time we're done, hopefully we'll have something that resembles a big rectangle frame and the outline of a wave that'll be just some nice basic shapes that we can utilize to color in during the painting process. So I'm going to use my chalk to make my marks and my lines and stuff, but I'm also going to be using some sort of measuring tool. So I will be using my medium brush as a measuring tool to guide me through these dots. You could certainly use anything that you want. You could actually use a ruler if you want to too. So what I'm going to do for my very first mark that I'm going to make, I'm going to have it up in this left-hand corner of my canvas. I'm about 2 inches away from the top of my canvas and 2 inches away from the edge of my canvas. So somewhere in through here is going to be my first dot. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my measuring tool and I'm going to see how far away from the edge of my canvas I made that first dot. Then I'm going to travel down. I would say if this is about halfway up or down my canvas, I'm about 1.5 inches below that. Make myself a second dot. I'm not going to connect those two dots with a vertical line. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight at this point. If you need it to be perfectly straight, you can certainly whip out a ruler, but I'm just going to connect them like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my height from here with my fancy measuring tool, and I'm going to come over to the right hand side, and I'm going to be about maybe a little bit further in, maybe about 3 inches in from the edge of my canvas, somewhere in through here, and I'm going to make myself another dot. So this is going to be the same height as this one, and it doesn't have to be of an equal distance away from the edge of the canvas. And then I'm going to connect these two with a horizontal line. So again, doesn't have to be super duper straight. That's what chalk is for. We can always make some adjustments along the way if we need to. Then I'm going to do, this is probably the most difficult one because I need it to be the same distance from here as this one, as well as the same height from the bottom as this one. So you can kind of eyeball it to start with your distance over here. I'm going to measure it with my fancy measuring tool, come down about as far as I think it's going to be, so somewhere in through here. And then I can take this and just make sure that I've got it the same height. So I can take this, measure it. Oh, it's almost right along the same line as my shiny bristle part of my brush. So somewhere around there, it looks like I've got a pretty decent spot, and then I'm going to connect those two. So this is going to be the exterior box for our frame, and then I just need to connect these two. Again, with another just kind of vertical line connecting those two. I need to make one more smaller rectangle, so this will be about 1 inch in from the one that I have now. You can certainly measure it if you want. You can eyeball it, whatever you want. I'm just going to go maybe up 1 inch from here and in 1 inch from here, make myself a dot. Do the same thing here. Over about 1 inch, so up 1 inch, in 1 inch, somewhere like that. 1 inch, 1 inch. So I'm just making 4 more little markers. And of course you could measure them out if you wanted to. and then I'm just going to connect those four. So this is going to give me a pretty symmetrical rectangles. Yours might be longer or wider than mine. Whatever happens is totally fine. Maybe you want yours to have, you know, be farther away from the top of your canvas or closer to the bottom, whatever works. Now I'm going to make myself the outline of my wave. So if this is about the center of my frame here, and of course my frame is a little bit off to the left because I have a bigger space over here than I do over here. So somewhere about here is my center. I'm going to go over about halfway between that and here and make myself a marker somewhere in through here. And then this wave is going to end up in the bottom right hand corner. So I'm going to connect these two with two humps. So one like that, and then maybe one like this. And again, doesn't have to be exactly as mine. And that is all I'm going to be doing for my outline. You can certainly adjust this if you need to. And then we're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So you can put your chalk away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be painting our sky, our base coat for our wave, and our base coat for our frame. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm going to use are blue, white, green, and brown. And I'm going to start with my sky. So I'm going to put blue and white on my brush at the same time. I have about equal parts of both. I'm going to start at the top of my sky. I want to bring it right up to my picture frame. And so I'm going right into my chalk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my sky a little bit darker up at the top, and then I'm going to get it to go a little bit lighter as it comes down the sky into the wave. So I just picked up a little bit more blue and white to take care of this top part. I'm going right into my chalk. I want to make sure I have it up at least to the chalk. Even if you overlap it a little bit, that's totally fine, because the frame, when we put the frame, we'll be able to clean up that line. And then as I move down my sky, I'm going to keep picking up white paint. So my sky gets lighter and lighter. You can apply it. I'm going to do kind of a circular type of brush stroke to maybe imply that there's some clouds maybe floating by, or you can have it nice and smooth. Whatever works for you is totally fine. I'm picking up more blue and white, so I have a little bit darker up here in the sky, and then coming down with more white down at the bottom. So again, you can have yours as blue or as light as you want. I'm going to bring this color right down into this little crevice down in through here. So when I have my wave on there, maybe it'll crash and overlap my sky a little bit. And then just kind of maneuvering the paint around in these little circular motions, so I make sure that I get the entire sky painted, bringing it right down to that chalk mark, right, and hitting that, hitting the chalk mark, so that way I have good coverage and I don't have to worry about any areas being unpainted. So just reloading my brush whenever I feel the need to add a little bit more paint in through there. And then once you feel like you've got your sky nice and covered, you can do as many layers on it as you want, have whatever details in it that you'd like. But once you feel like you've got a nice good representation for yourself, you're going to wash and dry that brush, and then we're going to paint the base coat for the wave. So I am just going to be using my phthalo green. I don't need to do any fancy brush stroke in here. I really am just looking to get a base coat on the wave. This is going to provide me this beautiful tropical look to the water. So I'm just making sure again that I bring it all the way to the edges of my chalk mark, so that way when I go to do the frame will kind of overlap this this aspect of the painting, and it'll provide a more finished look to it by the time we're done. And then I'm bringing this up in through here. This edge doesn't have to be perfect where it meets the sky, nor does this one, because we're going to have the wave kind of buckling over it and kind of going in front of it. So if you don't have a perfectly executed line right there, don't worry about it. And even the wave itself, where this green paint is, don't worry about that the coverage being perfect on that, because this is just the base coat for it. We're going to be adding all kinds of details on top of it. So even if you can detect the brush stroke and you have, streakiness to it, that's okay, because we'll be, like I said, we're going to be doing so many additional details on top of it. This is just the base coat. And then once you've got that on there, we're going to wash and dry the brush and do the base coat for the picture frame. So I'm just going to be using brown paint, but I know that my brown paint is a little bit translucent. So I am going to be conscious about the direction of my brush strokes for this section. So what I'm going to do is I've got just brown paint on my brush, and how I start each side to it, I'm going to do a diagonal line from the corner in through here, and then I pull the paint out as it's wet in the direction of in a horizontal direction for the bottom and the top, and then I'll do it vertical for the left and the right. In the center of the frame, that it doesn't have to be perfect. Even your edges don't have to be perfect at this point, because we will, again, we've got another coat that we're going to be doing on all of these sections. But I am, consciously trying to get most of that chalk mark covered up. Again, in the corner, I'm going to go in a diagonal way, and then I pull the paint in the direction of that side that I'm working on. So that way it will look like we're in essence kind of starting the wood grain direction for these pieces. You might find that you want a solid color frame that's not going to have the texture in it like I'm providing in mine. But if you do want a little bit of texture in it, providing these directional brush strokes will help along that process of giving the illusion of a textured type of piece of wood. And again, going to do the same thing up and through here, just kind of diagonal line, and while that paint is wet, just kind of pull it down. Picture frames will typically have what's called a mitered corner, which is where the wood meets at an angle like this. So us providing that diagonal line within that corner is going to also add to the realistic illusion of this particular object. And this is one of the corners that is going to meet an area that I've already painted. So I'm going to do the same exercise here, where I wet the corner and then I pull it up into that section. So this will help to eliminate any kind of awkward type of brush strokes. So I'm going to go over here. So just my diagonal line. I'm going to do this side one first. So again, I just kind of pull it down like this while that paint is still wet, and then just ride right down my chalk mark all the way down. And then I can do the same thing here, where you just kind of do the diagonal and then pull it up into that section. Again, while the paint is wet, that's going to help to eliminate an awkward kind of paint stroke in that corner if you want to give it this illusion. And then just riding it down the side. And then I just have the top piece of my frame to go. And you might find if you desire really clean edges to this piece of framework that we're doing, you could certainly use a ruler, or you could tape off the edges with masking tape or something. So it'll be wherever your visual preference is. I'm going to start this corner again with my diagonal line, and then pulling it towards that direction. I might as well go ahead and do the other one up here. You can again, or you can see you can kind of do each one of these steps in whatever order that you want. I'm trying to avoid getting my hand in wet paint in through here. That's why I kind of am doing this top one in a little funky of a order, whereas the other ones I just kind of did them nice and fluidly because I wasn't afraid to hit wet paint. But right now I'm a little afraid to go through wet paint, so just slowing down a little bit. And you might find that your paint is dry by the time you get here, and you don't have to worry about going through wet paint. Actually, the sky is dry, so I have a tendency of having my hand resting on my canvas, especially when I'm doing seemingly straight lines like I am right now. So that's where I was a little bit hesitant coming to this top one, because I knew that my hand would be resting on the canvas. So I was conscious about wet paint in through there. And then we're going to be utilizing, let's see, what are we going to do for the next step? We are going to be utilizing our small brush for the next step. So once you've got the, actually, no, we're going to use this brush again. We'll use our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our frame and its shadow. So I'm going to use my medium brush. The colors I'm using are black, brown, rust, yellow, and white, and maybe some of my wall color too. So I am in my head envisioning my light source to kind of be up and a little bit to the left. So I'm going to have shadowy areas. If I want this frame to look like it's away from the wall a little bit or kind of three-dimensional, I'll put a shadow on the right side on the wall and underneath it on the wall. And then within the frame itself, I'm going to have this section of my frame a little bit lighter than this section to imply that this section will be a little bit shadowed by it sticking up, and this side will be a little bit lighter from the light hitting it. And then I'll do conversely, these two will go a little bit lighter from here and then darker into here. So you'll see how I'm going to do. I'm going to put little shadows in the corners too to imply that they're dipping in a little bit, and then I'll put a little highlight on the edges to make it look like there's a little popped out detail on the frame itself. So where I'm going to start is I'm going to start with my shadow on the wall. So I am going to be using a little bit of brown, a touch of black. I don't need a lot of black, and a little bit of water on my brush. So I like to take my brush and just kind of dip it in my water and then tap it on my paper towel. The shadow itself would be darker the closer it is to the frame, and then it could fade out a little bit lighter as it goes farther away if you want it to. Depending on how close the light source is would depend on where that shadow falls, so yours doesn't have to be exactly as mine. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to just kind of ride my brush down along the edge of my frame just to kind of see what color I have. If I want it lighter or darker, I definitely needed it a little bit darker, so I added a touch more black onto my brush. And I like to try and keep my paint nice and fluid during the shadow making process, so that way I can kind of move it around a little bit and spread it out. So I'm dropping it down below this corner in through here, and I want it to kind of go out a little bit further. So I'm just adding a little bit of water onto my brush so I can pull this shadow out just a little bit farther and just kind of keep moving my brush up and down to get it to give me a nice kind of vertical line. And again, you could have yours farther or closer than mine, whatever kind of works for you. And then once I've got that one, I want it to make sure it kind of works into this bottom shadow. So I'm going to pick up again black, brown, and a touch of water to get my shadow right nice and close underneath my the frame itself. Going to keep putting a tiny bit of water on my brush just to make sure that I can keep the edges nice and fluid to it, so I can just kind of keep moving it as I need, or thinning it out as I need, and just bringing this all the way over to here, maybe bringing this down a little bit at an angle in through here, and then just kind of making sure that this blends in a little bit with the wall. I don't necessarily need it to blend in a lot, but I really want it to look pretty natural. Shadows will can kind of be warped depending on the angle they're at, but if you have you know, a straight edge to the object, it likely the edge to the shadow would likely be pretty darn straight. It could be at a diagonal, but you'll still want it to be pretty straight. And if anything went wrong throughout this process, you can always pick up some of that wall color and get it to blend in. And know that in areas like this corner that I'm working on right now, I can, if something goes too wrong on me, I can always hide it with some of my wave that's coming in a future step. So I'm not terribly concerned, especially down in this bottom right hand corner. But again, if I felt I needed to do anything more to this, I would certainly That's looking pretty good to me. I would certainly add some of the wall color if needed. And then once I've got that done, that's looking pretty good to me. I might fiddle with it a little bit after it dries, but I'm digging how it's looking right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the interior of the frame. So I know that I have the dark color on my brush, so I might as well utilize that while it's on my brush. So I know that I'm going to want some shadow in these corners, so I just kind of put a little bit more shadow and then just pull it up just a little bit into this side of the frame in through here, and maybe a little bit going in this direction too. So hardly any paint on my brush right now, just kind of adding these little bits of shadows, additional shadows in these corners. So a little bit of the black and brown is on my brush, and just kind of working it into these corners so they really can have some good dimension and make it look like they are kind of dipped in a little bit. And this is meant to resemble wood. So if you have light spots and dark spots throughout the whole thing, that's awesome. That's going to make it look a little bit more natural. I do want a little shadow in this corner here just to say that it is dipped in a little bit, but I don't need it to travel out very far because the light is hitting it. So this is really just to kind of show the crease in the wood. Now what I'm going to do without washing my brush is I'm going to pick up some of that burnt sienna, and this is going to provide me with some really nice rich tones to, oops, that made my frame go a little bit bigger. Just the burnt sienna will help to add some rich tones to the piece of wood itself. If you want it to look really authentic, like there's knots and stuff in the wood, you can always do like little wavy lines. You can that will help to make it look like there's little knots, or the wood grain has some additional texture to it. But I'm not overdoing it with the burnt sienna. I'm just really utilizing this as an additional kind of color within the wood. Maybe you want yours to be a different kind of colored wood, whatever works for you. I'm actually going to pick up a little bit more of my brown. I feel like I've got a couple of bald spots throughout my wood grain that I want to kind of make sure are taken care of. So I also picked up a little bit of that brown. So now that I've got kind of good texture throughout this, I want to add some highlights. So I definitely want this edge to be lighter. So I'm going to pick up rust yellow, just a little bit of yellow, and a touch of white, and just wipe it off on the side of the palette. I don't need a lot of paint on my brush. I'm really just looking for some light representational marks to show that this side of the piece of wood is a little bit lighter than the others. So again, rust, yellow, and white, and not a lot, just kind of utilizing it in the wood grain a little bit, maybe a touch in through here. So all these little tiny nuances of the wood grain being lighter on one side or darker on another side, it will make it look a little bit more natural. And now that I've got that, I'm just going to add some super highlights around the edges. So this is going to be rust yellow and white, but with more white, and I'm going to have a quicker kind of line going down the edge of the piece of wood. It doesn't necessarily have to touch the edge itself. You can go a little away from it, maybe a touch more burnt sienna, but something that's going to indicate that there is a kind of a lip of sorts to the frame. And again, this is just because this is the way that I want my frame to look. You could certainly have little scroll marks, or you can have yours looking more ornate than mine. If you find if there's a frame in your house that you want to replicate, you can certainly have fun doing that. So again, I've got rust yellow and white. I think I want this to be a little bit lighter up and through there, and then I can put this light edge on the whole thing. So again, rust yellow and white is what I'm doing, because I'm envisioning the entire edge of the frame to be kind of like scalloped and poking out a little bit. So I'm just adding this light detail, and because I'm using all three of these colors on my brush at the same time, it's giving me an assortment of highlights throughout the edge of this wood. So some areas are going to look more yellowy, some are going to look more of the rusty tone. So wherever your visual preference is totally fine. That's what's going to make this look nice and like a natural piece of wood having a highlight on it. And then once I've got this done, I do need to put a little shadow at the edge underneath here. So I am going to wash and dry my brush in order to get black paint on my brush. This is going to clean up this under edge and over here on the left. So if the light source is over here, the frame itself would cast a tiny bit of a shadow on the picture itself. So I'm going to use a little bit of black and maybe a little brown too, just so I don't overdo it, and a touch of water. And I'm just going to try and give myself a pretty clean line right close to the frame, touching the frame right in through here and just kind of riding it along. You might find that you want to use your small brush to get this little step done, but wherever your comfort zone is totally fine. And then I'll do this to this top edge, and then I'll also do it to the left edge as well. I'm going to go right over, or just kind of clean up that edge of my frame. That looks pretty good. And then right down this side in through here. And then once you've got this done, you can do any little fiddling that you want. We're going to be utilizing our large brush for the next step. So you can put this medium brush away, do any little modifications you want, and take out your large brush for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the second step to the actual wave. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are black, green, yellow, blue, and possibly some white too, and definitely some white. So a lot of my colors. So what I'm in essence going to do is I'm going to have this I'm going to refer to it as the underside of the wave. So where this comes in, this little curve here, this is going to be the exterior of the wave, and this is going to be the underside or the interior of the wave. I'm going to have this really dark down in this bottom left hand corner, and it's going to get lighter and lighter as it comes up in through here. The idea here is I'm going to have it look like it's in, you know, the deep darkness of the ocean, and then as it's coming up in through here, it's going to actually be having shades of yellowish and turquoise and stuff up in through here to make it look like it's catching the light from the other side. And then we're going to do the water kind of billowing out of the framework in through here. So I will never have a lot of paint on my brush. I'm going to have very little bit of paint on my brush. I'm going to be using kind of a scrubbing type of technique to get it on here. And then when I am doing this over here, I'll probably be using this pulling type of technique. I'm going to start with a tiny bit of black paint on my brush, starting in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to work my way up towards here first, and then we'll put the wave on. So I've got black paint on my brush. I'm going to start right down by the edge of my picture frame, and if you bump into it like I just did, don't worry about it. You can always come back and clean up that edge. So very little bit of paint on my brush. I'm going to now just wipe my brush off on my paper towel, make sure I don't have too much, and I'm picking up some of my phthalo green to get this to blend in, and it's going to start to blend out into the lighter version of that green. So something like this. And I don't need it to go much farther than in through here, so you can even kind of just give yourself a little bit of a barrier like that. And then I'm going to just let that darkness kind of work its way off of my brush as I'm going up into the upper region of that wave. So now, without washing my brush, I'm going to pick up the green and my ultramarine blue as I'm working my way up this wave into the lighter area up above. You might find that you like that the green better than the blue, or vice versa. You can certainly kind of steer this into whatever way that you want. But right now I'm going to start picking up my yellow without washing my brush. So this is going to give me that really beautiful light color within that wave as it's kind of cresting over and catching the light from outside or from the sky. It will turn a little bit different as it dries, so you might find as you're going through your process that you want it to be, you know, more or less or lighter or darker. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my blue and green up in this top left-hand corner just to get this to transition from the bluish greenish color into the yellow. And in a second, I'm going to start picking up white as well to get this lighter, or to get this top area a little bit lighter. So that's kind of a nice transition for me. If you have a lot of black paint on your brush right now, I would recommend washing it. But if you don't feel like you have much black paint on your brush, you'll be safe to just pick up a teeny tiny dot of white paint like that. And this is going to help add these beautiful teal type of colors into the water, make it look like there's some ripples and some waves. I'm going to put a little bit more up towards this upper region just to make it feel like it's towards the top of the water and that it's catching a little bit of maybe sunshine or something up in that upper region of the wave itself. And then if you feel like you have any other little modifications that you want to do here, I'm like, do I want to do more? But I don't think so. I think I want to let it kind of dry and see if that's done it for me. I might come back after it's dry and do any little modifications to that area, but I'm going to move right over to here. So what I'm going to do in this area is I want the wave to look like it's falling down in this direction. I'm going to make it nice and dark up here, and then it's going to come lighter and lighter as it's falling out of the frame. So I'm picking up just a little bit of blue and green on my brush at the same time. I'm going to start, oops, I have a little stray bristle here. Just get that out of there. I'm going to start right up in through here, and I'm going to start pulling this down in the direction that I feel that the water would be falling. So something like this is going to get that started. Now what I'm going to do, just bringing this down just a little bit more in through here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start picking up a teeny tiny bit of white paint, just a teeny tiny bit, and these two colors, my blue and my green. So I have blue, green, and just a teeny tiny bit of white paint. I want this white paint to start lightening up my wave as it's coming out. So just a little bit in through here. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit more blue too, so that way the wave is a little bit bluer on this side. And of course you can have yours going in whatever color you want, but I'm thinking the blue on the exterior of the wave is going to give it a nice transition. So I just put a little bit more blue and white on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of get these two to intermingle with this dark area. So I'm just kind of rubbing my brush and getting these two lighter and darker sections to start talking with one another. I want this to look like it's got a nice trajectory coming out of the frame. So I'm going to start to kind of scrub it a little bit harder, and here we go. We're going outside the frame now. I'm just going to start pulling it down in through here. So I have the blue, white, and a teeny tiny bit of the green, not a lot of the green on my brush at this point, but I'm bringing this out into the room, I guess, and just kind of pulling it down in through here. I think I'm going to put a tiny bit more white paint on my brush so I can get this area just a little bit lighter up in through here. We're going to have a lot of splash and stuff like that in a little bit, but this is just going to kind of start the water falling out of the picture frame, which is fabulous. I'm almost using like a dry brush right now. I'm going to bring this down into the base of the room, something like this. And I'm not overdoing it. You can still see some of the wall color behind it. And again, if yours is greener than mine or bluer than mine, that's okay. I'm totally out of paint right now, so I'm reloading with a little bit of blue, green, and just a touch of white. So little that I'm wiping it off on my paper towel. I'm really just want to give myself the information as to where I want this splash to go right now. So this is going to be my first layer to it, and I'm just going to kind of pull it. I'm scrubbing it right now in this circular direction, just bringing some of it over in through here. And that, I believe, is going to be all I'm going to do for this at this point. We are going to be utilizing our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash, or you can put the large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the picture hanger. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to be using black, white, and maybe some brown. And what I'm in essence going to do, you don't necessarily always see the picture hanger. We're just going to have a string and a nail, but I wanted to add it to this, so it added a bit more detail to this and gave it more of an illusion type of effect. If you want to omit the hanger part, you can certainly do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make myself a couple of dots. I've got my small brush. I put black paint on my brush. I will always on this step have a little bit of water on my brush as well, because I want to make nice fluid clean lines. So I definitely, or you can water down your paint. Just instead of putting the water on your brush, you can actually thin out your paint a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of split the difference, find the middle of my picture frame, and then I'm going to go up near the top of my canvas and make myself a little bit of a small circular type of mark. We'll call this the head of the nail, something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a couple of other markers on the inside of here. So I'm going to come in from my corner about 2 inches and make myself a teeny little marker somewhere in through here. That's going to be my where my string is going to go, and then I'll do the same thing over here. Just come in about 2 inches and make myself a little marker for my string. So now I'm going to connect the dots. So I'm going to connect here to here and here to here. Again, making sure that I have nice thin paint on my brush at all times. I just also put a little bit of brown paint on my brush too, so I have black, brown, and water. And when I do these lines, I like to keep my eye on the prize, which means I can start here, but I'm always looking at here, and that steers my brush right into it. So here we go. And of course you could pencil yours in first too if you get a little nervous. So start at the center and then just kind of give and I'm not pushing hard, and I'm just kind of guiding myself right into my mark, something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. So I've got just repointing my brush, make sure my brush is as pointy as I want it to. And if something happens and you're like, oh my God, that was way too much, you can erase it with a little bit of water, or let it dry a minute, and then you can make it thinner, skinnier by using that wall color to thin it out. So here we go. I've got my paintbrush loaded up, but it's not pointy enough, so I'm repointing it, making sure it's pointy enough. There we go. And then I'm going to start here, keeping my eye on the prize, which is my other marker, and just kind of letting that steer me right in, a little wobble in through there. So since I had that little wobble, I'm going to show you how to correct it. I'm going to put a little bit of water on another brush. While it's wet, I can kind of scrub it out a little bit. So that's a trick, that if it goes too wide on you, while it's still wet, you can take a little bit of extra water on another brush and just kind of push it back a little bit and thin it out. That helps to do that. Now I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow of this string onto the wall. So if my light source is up here, I'm going to have just a teeny tiny little shadow on the wall below it. So I'm definitely going to load up my brush with more water, so that way my paint is very translucent, and I'll have it start at the nail right here, and then as it comes down, it can get a little bit wider and a little bit further away from the string itself. So I'm going to start here, and then as I come down, I definitely have good water on my brush right now, so it's nice and translucent, and then I'm just going to kind of push it a little bit, something like that. So it's a little bit wider as it's separating away from the actual string itself, and then I'll do the same thing over on this side. And if they don't turn out perfect, that's okay. So I just very lightly am touching my canvas, and then as it's coming down here, I push just a little bit harder, so it's a little bit wider. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the equation just to kind of thin this out. I don't need to paint it into my frame, something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on my actual string. So the first two marks that we made, I'm going to put a tiny bit of white paint on my brush, and I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on my piece of string as if it's catching some of that highlight. Oh, I'll put a little highlight on the nail too. So a little white on my brush, put a tiny highlight on that, and then I need more paint on my brush so we can actually see it. And then I'm just going to kind of skip along down this string in through here, give myself a little bit of a highlight, something like that. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And it doesn't have to be straight because the light could be catching it in different ways. If it's a you know, depending on the kind of string that it is, it might catch little different ways of the light source. So just a little bit of a highlight on that piece of string and bringing that down in through here. And then once you've got that done, we're going to be utilizing our large brush for the next step. So you can put your small brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish the wave coming out of the picture and all the little details that go with it. I'm going to use my large brush. The colors I'm going to use are definitely white, yellow, probably some black, and maybe a little bit of my blue and green as well. So what I love to do when I'm painting water splashing is I like to start with the darker colors and work my way to the lighter colors. So it really gives the water or whatever that fluid is a lot of dimension. So I'm going to apply the same thought process here. We've already really got some nice dark stuff underneath, but I want the splash to have more of that billowing type of effect. I also want to tell the story of my light source. So my light source is up above to the left a little bit. So my waves or my splashes, I'm going to have some real light spots on the left and the top of them. I'll probably have my wave a little bit lighter over here on the left side of my canvas and darker on the bottom right side. So we'll be playing with the different colors to this to get it to have a lot of dimension to it. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to start with kind of a grayish color. So I'm going to utilize some of my white. You can even use dirty white. It doesn't have to be perfect. And a tiny touch of black paint. I don't know if I said I was going to use black, but so blue, white, black, brown, yellow, lots of colors we're going to use. So anyways, I'm making myself a really kind of a light gray color. It doesn't have to be you want it to be darker than white. So this is kind of where I'm headed, and I can see I've got it next to my white, so I can definitely see that it is on the darker side. Again, this is one of those steps where less is more. You never need a lot of paint on your brush. So anytime you go to do something, just make sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some of this grayish type of color into the wave as it's coming out. But again, I don't want to take away all the other information that we've already done. So just kind of adding a little bit of this grayish tone. I'm going to start adding this also into this edge where it is coming out from the main wave itself. I can utilize the little tips of my brush to kind of give myself these little ripply type of marks coming out of the side of the wave. This is going to show that the wave has motion and movement to it. I can take this gray and kind of ripple it along the edge of the wave up in through here. So not taken away from all the other colors that we've already incorporated, but just adding to them with this additional bit of information that's going to show the motion to this water coming out. Maybe a little bit in through here. And again, less is more. So if you ever feel like you do too much, just kind of, you can wait a minute and add back some of the other colors, or you can just kind of back it off just a little bit with some water or your finger like I tend to do. So I have hardly any paint on my brush. I'm going to start adding more to the wave down in through here. So this is where I'm going to be utilizing that kind of scrubbing type of effect, giving myself these soft edges in through here. Maybe we've got some of this kind of shooting out the side of the canvas in through here, maybe a little bit of extra volume as it's coming in this area in through here. So you can really play with the direction of the water as it's coming out, using dots, using rubbing type of techniques. Really, it's going to be a visual interpretation on your part. I like to have different textures on mine. I want to be able to see the colors underneath, but I also want there to look like there's this voluminous type of feel to it. So that's where I'm just kind of proceeding with caution and doing different types of either scrubbing or dotting, so I can have maybe a big fluffy area in through here. Maybe I can see, you know, the darker stuff in through there. I know that I want this to come all the way over to my left hand side, so I am kind of giving myself a little bit more with just my very dry brush over in through here where I hadn't had some of the previous colors. This is going to allow me to put a lighter version because I don't have the blues and the greens. I think I actually want to put a little bit more of the bluish color here, so I'm going to put a tiny bit of blue and white on my brush right now, just an itty bitty bit. I just want to kind of get a little bit more color in this midsection. See, I'm proceeding with such caution. I don't even have any paint on my brush. There we go. We got it now. And this will provide me with the those tonal changes that I'm looking for, just to make sure that I've got them represented as they're coming down into the wave. You could even add, I just put a little bit more of the green on my brush, just again, because I'm feeling it. I feel like I want a little bit more in through here. So if you feel you want it, just add it. I feel like I want a little bit more green down here. So this is that final stage. Before I start building to that light, I want to make sure that I've got all those colors and those dark areas in. So I'm just kind of adding little pieces here and there as I'm feeling like I want them before I go ahead and add the bright white or lighter colors to it. So just adding a couple more little dark spots with the blue and green in through here. That's looking pretty good now. I'm thinking that's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a light, very pale yellow color. So I'm washing and drying my brush. Again, I don't want to bring the white too quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my white and add just a tiny little dot of yellow to it. So I don't want this to read as yellow. I want it to read as a different shade of white. That's not totally white. So that's where playing with different shades of white is going to allow you to get a more luminescent type of value to this. And then again, I don't need a lot of paint on my brush, so I'm going to just wipe it off on my paper towel. So this is going to start my very light areas to my wave. So I'm going to just kind of, I think I'm going to, yeah, this will work. I was going to say, I think I want a little more yellow as I'm going through it, but it's going to work out good for me. Just less, no, that's too much white, or too much yellow, there we go. Less paint on my brush is really what I need. So I'm just making sure I have, once you start, it's like you just want to make sure that you are in control. So I just had to wipe my brush off so I had less paint on my brush, so I am more in control. That's the key here. The less paint you have on your brush, the more you will remain in control. You can always add more paint. It's really tough to take away once it's on there. So I just add a little bit more paint to my brush. This is that light yellow color. I'm going to add a little bit more of this splash coming out in through here. I'm going to add some little bits of information up in through here. When you're up in this region up here, if this big brush is too much for you, you can certainly utilize one of the smaller brushes. So don't feel that you have to muscle through these tiny areas with this big brush. If you feel that you want to add or use your small brush to do these smaller areas, feel free to do so. I'm going to add a little bit of this lightness in through here. That's coming out good. It's funny because when you're doing these things, you have a plan in your head, but then as you're executing, it's like, wait, that didn't turn out the way that I want. And I am building my light areas, but I still have one more oomph of lightness to go, which is my white, and I'm reserving that for last. So that's another one of my tricks, is just to make sure that you don't use white too soon. I'm going to add maybe a little bit of the light yellow plus gray on my brush, so I can kind of get a little bit more volume in these without getting too light. So I have the light yellow plus a little bit of the gray that we made in through here, just to give these a little bit more information, just kind of bringing this down in through here. Maybe we've got a little pops over here, a little pop in through here, a little pop in through here. Right now I hardly have any paint on my brush, just kind of building my way to the lightness, little sprays in through here. Gonna build a little bit more in through here, going in for that light yellow again, just to give myself some extra brightness over here. Again, I haven't started with my white yet. That's going to come in a minute. That's when all the magic is going to happen. But again, just building your way to the light is where it makes it look a little bit more natural. Okay, I'm going in. I'm going in for some white now. So white paint is going to be where I have the little beautiful bright information that's going to just kind of pop and tell the whole story as to where all of, oops, I have yellow on my brush. Got to watch out for dirty palettes. This is going to really tell the viewer where the energy to this is. And again, just don't overdo it. That's my MO here, is just to not overdo it. Make sure that if I am putting it in the regions where I have the light yellow, that I don't take up all the light yellow, that I just put it in little pieces coming outside of that. And then that way, that's going to allow for the light yellow to kind of speak for itself as a light color, and then the white will add a little bit of additional information. I'm going to put a little bit of white up in through here just to show a little bit of foam or whatever coming off these little corners, maybe some little squiggle lines along the edges in through here to just kind of give a little bit more motion to it. And then I'm going to build, maybe this will get a little bit lighter in through here, and then I'm going to start I'm going to give myself a little bit more fluff in through here, and then I'm going to make this left one, the one over here on the left hand side. Right now I am kind of lightening up a little bit of this area over here with remnants of the white on my brush, but again, not overdoing it, just kind of taking it as I feel I need it, and then just kind of popping in a little bit more of the lightness on these, but not overdoing it again. Putting more over in through here because I want this left side to kind of read as maybe even a little bit brighter than the right side. And of course, I just fiddle with it. Once I've got kind of my plan in place, then I would kind of just let it dry and step away from it, see if there's any little bits of fiddling that I want to do. You can always bring back some of your wall color. I think I actually want a little bit of this light, a little bit more of this light yellow over in here, just to make it feel like this wave over here has a little bit more volume to it. So I just went back into that light yellow. So you can just kind of keep fiddling with it. If you feel like you want to add more in one area and less in another area, do it. This is, your representation of this surreal type of painting style. And when you're getting into these type of paintings, there's no rules. You just do whatever you're feeling. If you want it to look realistic, great. If you want it to have the fun and the freedom of being just carefree, then awesome, but just have fun with it. If you want more blue, put more blue. If you want more darkness, put more darkness. I just picked up a tiny bit more blue to get this a little bit darker down in this corner, but a little bit blue, a little bit of, whoops, that was a little bit of black on my brush, I guess. You can really just adjust these as you see fit. The more contrast in colors, the more dimension that they're going to have, these waves. So just play with it as much as you want. And then we are going to be utilizing our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this beautiful wave, I'm digging it. I think I want a little bit more up into here so it looks like it's kind of really super duper energetic. But once you've got this done, we're going to utilize our small brush for the next step. So you can just put this large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm actually going to use white paint today, and I'm going to sign it in the bottom left-hand corner. So I like to sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be. It's totally fine. It's your painting. You get to sign it however you'd like. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very fun, surreal type of image, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.